Today, General Electric requiring all of its U.S. workers to get vaccinated or seek exemptions. It says it's to follow President Biden's order. Netflix beating expectations on earnings and new subscribers. Why does the company's founders say they're in uncharted territory? And overdraft fees hit a record high, but the good news is there are more and more ways to avoid those fees. How you can get around them and much more coming up on NTD Business. Good evening and welcome to NTD Business. I'm Evelyn Lee in for Paul this week. General Electric has asked its U.S.-based workers to get the COVID-19 shots or seek medical or religious exemptions. The company is doing this to comply with President Biden's executive order. The president signed an order last month requiring federal contractors to mandate COVID-19 shots for their employees. They have to be vaccinated by December 8th. As a federal contractor, GE said it is complying with the executive order. The company updated its vaccine policy for more than 50,000 workers last week. It's the latest employer to impose a vaccine requirement. Supporters of vaccine mandates see them as necessary to pull the country out of the pandemic, but critics are calling them unconstitutional and authoritarian. And railroad company Union Pacific is suing its workers' unions. And that's after the unions sued the railroad over its vaccine mandate. The railroad wants its 31,000 employees to be vaccinated. Union Pacific's unions argue that the railroad giant needed to first negotiate with them before requiring all workers to get the vaccine. In its own lawsuit, Union Pacific says it has the authority to mandate the shots, and it's necessary to keep operations running smoothly. It filed its lawsuit to prevent workers from going on strike or affecting the company's operations. The unions say they generally support the vaccine, but have issues with how Union Pacific is enforcing it. And if you're planning on traveling to New York City, you might want to make sure to bring proof of vaccination. You will be required to show it for most indoor settings, which doesn't sit well with some people. NTD's Arian Pastar spoke with a group of people who decided to peacefully protest the mandate.
It doesn't matter whether you want a whole meal or just a coffee. If you want to enjoy it indoors here in New York City, you have to be vaccinated. Now, last night I joined a group of demonstrators who went to a cafe without showing proof of vaccination. And it ended just the way they expected it to end. The group of a little more than 20 people met at a park in downtown Manhattan. It's not their first visit to an establishment they're not allowed in. They're calling their protests sit-ins. According to the organizer, the vaccine mandate doesn't make any sense, especially for these kinds of businesses.
It's very, very clear that restaurants are not the key point of transmission. It's very, very clear to me that there's some deeper agenda going on behind these things. I find it very difficult to believe that a virus that leaked from a Chinese laboratory in the middle of an election year where there was a vaccine available 2 days after the election was over was somehow a coincidence.
Another protester went so far as to say that these kinds of mandates endanger America as we know it.
Our rights are in peril. Our country is in peril. And as far as I'm concerned, vaccine mandates is the end of America. That is the end of free choice.
Once at the cafe, an employee told the group to leave because they didn't provide proof of vaccination as requested. Shortly after that, the employee called the police. Now, it's interesting to note that the police didn't remove the group of people because of the vaccine mandate, but rather because of criminal trespass, since the business decided not to serve them.
It has nothing to do with the mandate.
Correct, yeah. They said they don't want you here. You're causing a disturbance in their store, so they're requesting that you leave.
One demonstrator refused to leave. He fell on the ground in the process. He said he was pushed. Police say he laid himself down. They arrested and took him away after he remained on the ground and refused to leave. None of the other demonstrators was arrested. They're planning to do more protests like this one in the future. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
And interest rates on the most popular home loan shot to a 6-month high last week, while applications for loans fell to the lowest since early September. The Mortgage Bankers Association says the rate on a 30-year mortgage climbed to 3.23%, the highest level since early April. Meanwhile, applications were down nearly 5% from the week before. Purchase activity is constrained by insufficient housing supply and elevated home prices. How quickly that situation is resolved remains the big unknown. On Tuesday, the Commerce Department said home building unexpectedly fell in September and residential construction permits dropped to a one-year low, with builders still struggling with shortages of raw materials and labor. And overdraft fees are at an all-time high. So what does that mean for Americans living paycheck to paycheck? How can they avoid those fees? I spoke with an expert to find out. Half of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck right now. And on top of that, overdraft charges are hitting record highs. They're currently at $33.58, which is more than 10 cents higher than last year's amount. But Greg McBride, the chief financial analyst at Bankrate, says that there are plenty of low-fee and no-fee options. Consumers can even take steps to avoid fees altogether.
Yeah, I think for most people, the answer is going to be a non-interest checking account that doesn't have any balance requirements, doesn't charge any fees, doesn't have any transaction requirements.
He says that interest checking accounts come with exorbitant balance requirements and much higher fees. But at the same time, they offer very little interest. Non-interest accounts, on the other hand, don't have these strings attached.
And that way, any excess cash you have can be more efficiently deployed in something like an online savings account or for investment purposes.
This is the third consecutive year to see a rise in overdraft fees, but they vary depending on where you are. Philadelphia has the highest overdraft fees, followed by Baltimore. Cincinnati is the city with the lowest, followed by Los Angeles.
Set up some lines of defense. Set up a link between your checking account and your savings account so that in the event of a slip up, it's your money, not the bank's money, that covers that shortfall.
He suggests signing up for email or text alerts that let you know when your balance drops below a certain threshold. He also advises developing a habit of checking your account balance before making a transaction. Evelyn Lee, NTD News. If you've been wondering where Paul is, he's in Louisiana this week at the New Orleans Investment Conference. It's billed as the longest-running investment conference in the U.S., and it features thought leaders like former Congressman Ron Paul and top money managers like Peter Schiff and Peter Boockvar. Here's Paul with Santiago Capital CEO Brent Johnson.
So we're here at the New Orleans Investment Conference. We have Brent Johnson, the CEO of Santiago Capital. Really excited to speak with him. Brent, how's the trip been so far?
So far, so good. It wasn't too bad of a trip, and I'm excited. Last time I was here was 20 years ago, so I'm excited to be back in New Orleans.
Wow, at the conference?
No, I was here for another conference in a previous life 20 years ago, and you know, it's New Orleans is kind of one of those iconic cities you always hear about, so it's kind of nice to come back.
How was it speaking in front of the crowd today?
That was good. I always enjoy this stuff, so it was great.
Awesome. You know, follow you on Twitter, some awesome content. One particular tweet stood out to me recently. I want to ask you about it. You said a growing stock market and foreigners buying U.S. Treasury debt is a matter of national security for virtually every major economy on Earth. Can you explain this to me?
Yeah, what I was really referring to here is I think there's this perception out there that the U.S. is in a bad situation, and I would say that there's accuracy to that. We are, in somewhat of a tough financial situation, both from just an economic perspective and a demographic perspective. But it's not that we're the only ones. This is not a unique situation that the U.S. finds itself in. And so while, yes, the Fed and the other monetary authorities have kind of made it a national security to keep the economy growing, push the stock market higher, and we need people to continue buying our debt, that's an absolute fact. But it's also true of countries in Europe. It's true of Japan. It's true of countries all over the world. It's not a uniquely American situation, and so when I think people do their analysis like that, if they do it just in a vacuum and they just analyze one country at a time, they're missing the big picture.
Because I think the big key word and the buzzword we have over the past 12 months or so is inflation, right? That the price of goods is going up. People could invert it and say the value of the dollar is going down, but you feel that compared with other currencies, the euro, the yen, the yuan, the US is in a much better place because of the characteristics of either the currency or of the US economy. Can you go through that? Why is the US dollar resilient?
Well, part of the reason the US dollar is resilient is that it is the global reserve currency. And what that means is it's not just used by the United States, it's used by the whole world. It's used for trade. If Japan is buying soybeans from Brazil, it's very, very likely that invoice is invoiced in dollars rather than yen or reals.
Why is that?
Well, it's because there's a couple of reasons. Because for a long time the United States had the most trusted economy, the most stable form of government, and they were the global hegemon. They're the sole superpower. That country throughout history typically has the global reserve currency. It makes it easier to trade with, but not only that, the country enforces that. The global bully or the global hegemon tells other countries, we want you to do it this way. And for the most part, other countries get in line. Now, there's always some skirmishes along the way and disagreements and some pushback, but the global reserve currency is really a function of global hegemony, either from an economic perspective or a military perspective. And so we largely, and when I say we, I mean the United States, the United States largely controls or at least steers the global economy. And we don't have absolute control. Of course, there's ways that people can, do things a little differently, but by and large, that is the way it works. And so as a result, other countries will, and because not only that, because we're the biggest consumer market in the world, we are most people's biggest client. So whether it's German cars or agriculture from South America or minerals from Africa, the United States is buying most of those. We're either the first or second biggest client for just about every war in the world. So since other countries are selling their goods in dollars and they're getting dollars back, they will save, and they know they need to trade in dollars because that's the global reserve currency. They will keep their savings in dollars.
So what could put that at risk, looking historically or looking at the current circumstances?
Well, from an economic standpoint, if we were to continue to run budget deficits and we were to continue to have trade deficits over a long period of time, that could push our fiscal situation into a poor state, and that could cause people to lose faith in the dollar. And not only that, if from an economic perspective, if we could not sustain the strongest military and we could not enforce the US dollar payment system and the US dollar hegemony, that could lead to it. Now, people are probably hearing me saying this, says, well, that's exactly what we have right now, so therefore the dollar will lose value. And I would say that would be true if there was somewhere else in the world who was in good fiscal shape. If someone else had their house in order and had a big military that they could challenge the United States. But there's just not. There is no global economic hegemon that is in good financial shape who has a military that can challenge on a global scale and beat the United States. And so as a result, I think the idea that the dollar is going to lose value versus all these other currencies is wrong.
Brett Johnson, Santiago Capital, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And DC's Attorney General is suing Mark Zuckerberg over Facebook's alleged failure to protect user privacy. It's part of an ongoing investigation. Officials say Zuckerberg was personally involved in decisions that gave consulting firm Cambridge Analytica access to Facebook user data. The Attorney General says Zuckerberg's inclusion in the lawsuit should send a signal that powerful CEOs can be held accountable. Representatives from Facebook called the allegations meritless and said they will continue to focus on the facts. And the S&P 500 and the Dow closed higher Wednesday, with investors eyeing better than expected quarterly earnings. The Dow rose 152 points, or 0.4%. The S&P 500 gained 17 points, also 0.4%. But the Nasdaq lost 7 points. Netflix has beat estimates despite having less content. Its hit show Squid Game was such a hit, CEO Reed Hastings wore the iconic green tracksuit during the earnings call. NTD's Faye Quarter has more.
Netflix's earnings are out. The streaming service had earnings per share of $3.19, while Wall Street expected $2.56. It also added 4.4 million subscribers, while Wall Street predicted it would add 3.84 million.
We had a couple big hits, as you know, you mentioned one with Squid Game, La Casa de Papel, the first part of season 5, but a lot of variety and quality programming throughout the quarter with things like Never Have I Ever, and He's All That, and Chestnut Man and Copenhagen.
Notably, Squid Game was a huge hit. Netflix says a mind-boggling 142 million member households globally have chosen to watch the title in its first 4 weeks, and that it's their #1 program in 94 countries.
Squid Game, as Reed pointed out, was picked up a couple of years ago from the Korea team, who did recognize it to be one of what they thought would be their biggest title this year. So good that they did. But I can't tell you that we had the same eyeball on it to tell you that it was going to be the biggest title in our history around the world.
Even though the company beat growth estimates, there was little growth in the U.S. Most of the growth took place in Asia. Netflix had a lighter than normal content slate in Q1 and Q2 due to COVID-related production delays in 2020. And now they're seeing a stronger slate coming.
We're in uncharted territory, Nidhi. We have so much content coming in Q4 like we've never had. So we'll have to feel our way through, and it rolls into a great next year also.
Netflix is still the leading video streaming service ahead of Amazon Prime and Disney+. Faye Quarter, NTD News.
And Micron says it's considering building a new memory chip factory in the United States. But it says state and federal subsidies are needed to offset the costs, which will be higher in the U.S. than they are for its factories in Asia. The company is the only American firm that makes both key types of memory chips. Micron's chief business officer told Reuters memory chips are about 30% of the global semiconductor market, but only 2% are made in the U.S. He says the U.S. needs more production for the sake of national security and supply chain resiliency. Micron estimates costs for memory manufacturing are 45% higher in the United States than in Asia. Micron's decision on the new factory depends on whether U.S. subsidies are put in place. Apple's launched a series of new products recently. If you can't afford a new Mac or iPhone, how about a new polishing cloth? It costs $19. Is it worth it? NTD's Colin Fredrickson asked around.
Apple is selling its new polishing cloth for $19, and it's already sold out until late November. Despite the high demand, not everyone is impressed.
I don't think I'd buy it either way. I have a lot of questions. I don't really have anything to say, but it's just like, what? Like, it's random.
I think it's extremely unnecessary, especially for the price point.
One Twitter user writes, if it's got an Apple logo on it, you already know people are going to buy it anyway. Some people will still go for it.
Yeah, I'd probably buy it. I trust Apple to make something that's good quality.
Apple says it's made with soft, non-abrasive material. The polishing cloth cleans any Apple display, including nanotexture glass, safely and effectively. But it doesn't specify what it's made out of. So is there some futuristic tech hiding in it?
The truth is, the Apple polishing cloth has no technology behind it. It's simply a microfiber cloth with the Apple logo on top.
The cloth is marketed as the only safe way to clean any surface of an Apple product, including iPhones, iPads, and iMacs. So is it worth your money?
I would say not. It's actually comparable to a $1 microfiber cloth that you can find on Amazon.
Subay emphasizes the branding power reflected in the market behavior.
We are investing in a brand name that has been marketed to us rather than the actual value.
He points out that Apple invests millions of dollars every single week to market its brand and products.
It's safe to say anything Apple produces with their logo, no matter the technology, no matter how regular of an item it is, it will have really high value.
So far, the cloth has already caught a lot of attention and sarcasm on social media. Some say they'll show up everywhere wearing the cloth like this. Others mention they are waiting for a pro version. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
And British fashion house Burberry has poached the boss of Versace as its new CEO. The move ends months of uncertainty at Burberry, which had been searching for a replacement for Marco Gabbetti since June. Gabbetti announced a shock departure midway into a multi-year turnaround plan to take the brand further upmarket. Burberry shares have seen extended losses since the announcement. They were up slightly on Wednesday. The brand says Jonathan Akeroyd was the right choice. He will step into the role in April of next year. And still to come, Google unveiling new phones. What's special about this lineup, and why should Apple and Samsung watch out? And a Polish historian brews a beer from medieval times with the help of an ancient cellar and some scientists. That and more after this short break.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN, guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
Shall we begin?
People are starving, sir. They're unable to buy a simple loaf of bread. Can you make any exception to the mark 666?
None. If you don't get the mark, you don't eat. It's that simple. My goal has never changed. People will bow down to me, or they will die.
Watch out, Apple and Samsung. Google is unveiling its new Pixel 6 phones today with a custom-made chip. The Pixel 6 and Pixel 6 Pro use Google's new in-house processor called Tensor. The company says it lets them operate 80% faster than the Pixel 5 models. The phones run on Android 12, Google's biggest software update in years. Their batteries can last almost 2 days. Apple, Huawei, and Samsung already make their own chips. And Google's launch comes a day after Apple revealed its new MacBook Pro and AirPods. And fans of a popular low-carb snack may need to check their pantries due to a recent recall. The USDA says Evans Food Group is pulling more than 10,000 pounds of pork products from store shelves. These pellets make fried pork skins or pork rinds, also known as chicharrones. The products were shipped out without being inspected and sold under several brands to stores in Arizona, California, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Washington. The USDA has not received any reports of adverse reactions. Still, officials say people should throw the recalled snacks away or return them to stores. Consumers can find out more about the recall on the USDA's website. Ever wonder what food actually tasted like hundreds of years ago? Well, one Polish historian is trying to recreate a medieval-style beer with an unusual ingredient. Here's NTD's Arlene Richards.
A Polish historian has created a medieval beer recipe using yeast collected from Krakow's historic cellars. He thought of bringing the medieval white beer back to life in 2016 and just brewed his first pint.
We're making this for the first time in about 170 years. It has been about 178 years since the last documented batch of the White Krakow beer. So nobody can tell us what the brewing process was back then and how the beer tasted. There is nobody alive who has drunk such beer in Krakow.
Krakow's white beer was widely consumed from the Middle Ages up until the 18th century. Dria collected the hibernated yeast from sediments found in cellars once used for beer fermentation. The breakthrough moment was cooperation with microbiologists. They were able to create a live brewer's yeast culture from the collected samples.
We do our part of the work by creating a material for the yeast so it can work on it. And then for 3-4 weeks, the yeast is working. We can't help it or disturb it. The most important thing is not to disturb it so that it can do everything in peace. So it needs the proper temperature, proper pressure, and cleanliness, cleanliness, cleanliness.
The first batch has to age for about 4 weeks before it's ready. Afterwards, researchers from Krakow's Agriculture University will study its sugar, protein, and vitamin content for comparison to modern beers. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And that's the latest business updates for today. You can catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie Cox at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, that's all for today. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.